Welcome, dear listeners, to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the annals of time, unraveling the mysteries of the past and illuminating the triumphs and tribulations of human civilization. Today, we find ourselves at the threshold of one of the most pivotal battles in modern history, the Battle of Borodino. This epic clash of arms, which took place on September 7, 1812, would prove to be a turning point in the Napoleonic Wars, as the French Grand Army, led by the indomitable Napoleon Bonaparte, faced off against the Russian army under the command of General Mikhail Kutuzov. As we delve into the origins of this seminal event, let us transport ourselves to the rolling hills and verdant forests of western Russia, where the tranquil village of Borodino lies nestled. It is here, amidst the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft chirping of birds, that the fate of empires would be decided. The village itself was situated near the Moskva River, approximately 70 miles west of Moscow, a strategic location that would play a crucial role in the battle to come. To understand the events leading up to the Battle of Borodino, we must first examine the complex web of alliances and rivalries that characterized European politics during the early 19th century. The Treaty of Tilsit, signed on July 7, 1807, had established a fragile peace between France and Russia, with Napoleon and Tsar Alexander I forming an alliance against their common enemies. However, this treaty would ultimately prove to be a mere facade, as Napoleon's continued expansionist policies and his desire for hegemony over Europe would soon lead to the breakdown of this agreement. In the years preceding the battle, Napoleon's army had been making rapid gains, capturing key cities such as Vilna and Vitebsk. The Russian army, under the command of General Michael Andreas Barclay de Tolly, had adopted a scorched earth policy, burning crops and destroying infrastructure to deny the French army supplies and shelter. This strategy would prove to be highly effective, as the French army's supply lines became increasingly stretched and vulnerable to guerrilla attacks. As tensions between France and Russia continued to escalate, Tsar Alexander I began to mobilize his military forces in preparation for a potential conflict. The Russian army was reorganized and strengthened, with new commanders such as General Kutuzov and General Pyotr Bagration appointed to lead the troops. Meanwhile, Napoleon's army was also undergoing significant changes, with many of its experienced officers and soldiers having been killed or wounded in previous campaigns. In the months preceding the battle, the French army had been advancing steadily through Russia, but at great cost. The Russian winter was approaching, and the French army's supply lines were becoming increasingly tenuous. Napoleon's generals, including Marshal Louis-Nicolas Davout and Marshal Michel Ney, were growing increasingly concerned about the army's ability to survive the coming winter. As we approach the eve of the Battle of Borodino, it is clear that the stage is set for a catastrophic confrontation. The French army, weary from months of marching and depleted by disease and desertion, would soon face off against a determined Russian force, entrenched in their defensive positions and prepared to fight to the death. The battle would be fought on September 7, 1812, near the village of Borodino, and would prove to be one of the bloodiest battles of the Napoleonic Wars. And so, dear listeners, as we conclude this introductory segment on the origins of the Battle of Borodino, we find ourselves poised on the cusp of a pivotal moment in history. The stage is set, the players are in position, and the fate of empires hangs precariously in the balance. Join me next as we delve into the heart of the battle itself, where bravery, strategy, and chance would intersect in a maelstrom of bloodshed and heroism, forever etching the name Borodino into the annals of history. Welcome back to History with Herodotus, where we continue our journey through the annals of time, unraveling the mysteries of the past and illuminating the triumphs and tribulations of human civilization. Today, we delve into the heart of the battle itself, where bravery, strategy, and chance would intersect in a maelstrom of bloodshed and heroism. The Battle of Borodino, fought on September 7, 1812, was a clash of titans pitting the French Grand Army, led by Napoleon Bonaparte, against the Russian army under the command of General Mikhail Kutuzov. The battle took place near the village of Borodino, approximately 70 miles west of Moscow, and would prove to be one of the bloodiest battles of the Napoleonic Wars. As the French army approached the Russian lines, they were met with a hail of artillery fire, which shredded their ranks and weakened their resolve. The Russians had chosen their defensive positions wisely, anchoring their flanks on the Moskva River and the village of Borodino, and had constructed a series of fortified earthworks and redoubts to protect their troops. Napoleon, ever the master strategist, recognized the strength of the Russian defenses and decided to launch a series of diversionary attacks on the Russian flanks, while simultaneously launching a massive assault on the center of the Russian line. The French army was arrayed in three main columns, with Marshal Louis-Nicolas Davout's corps leading the attack on the Russian right flank, Marshal Michel Ney's corps attacking the Russian left flank, and Marshal Joachim Murat's cavalry reserve providing support to the center. The battle raged on for hours, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The Russians fought valiantly, but the French army's sheer numbers and firepower began to tell. The Russian defenses were breached in several places, and their lines began to waver. However, just as it seemed that the French were about to emerge victorious, the Russians launched a series of desperate counterattacks, which threw the French back on their heels. One of the most famous episodes of the battle was the defense of the Bagration Flèches, a series of fortified earthworks constructed by General Piotr Bagration's troops. The Flèches were attacked repeatedly by the French, but the Russians held firm, inflicting heavy casualties on their attackers. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the Russian defenders fought with incredible bravery, and their sacrifice would become legendary in Russian military history. As the day drew to a close, both armies were exhausted and depleted. The French had suffered over 28,000 casualties, while the Russians had lost nearly 38,000 men. The battle was tactically indecisive, but strategically it marked a significant turning point in the war. The Russian army had fought the French to a standstill, and Napoleon's invasion of Russia would ultimately prove to be a disastrous mistake. The aftermath of the Battle of Borodino saw both armies regrouping and reassessing their positions. The Russians, despite their heavy losses, had preserved their army and were able to continue fighting. The French, on the other hand, were beginning to feel the strain of their long and bloody campaign. Their supply lines were stretched to the breaking point, and their troops were exhausted and demoralized. The fate of empires hangs precariously in the balance, and the consequences of this battle will be felt for generations to come. Join me next as we explore the aftermath of the battle and the ultimate defeat of Napoleon's army in Russia, marking the beginning of the end of his imperial ambitions. Welcome back to History with Herodotus, where we continue our journey through the annals of time, unraveling the mysteries of the past and illuminating the triumphs and tribulations of human civilizations. In the aftermath of the battle, Napoleon's army continued its advance on Moscow, but the Russian army, led by General Mikhail Kutuzov, employed a scorched earth policy, burning everything in their path and leaving the French to face a barren and unforgiving landscape. The French army, already weakened by the bloody battle, began to succumb to the harsh conditions, with hunger, disease, and cold taking a devastating toll on their ranks. As the French approached Moscow, they found the city abandoned and ablaze, the Russians having set fire to everything that could be of use to the enemy. The French occupation of Moscow was a hollow victory, as they soon realized that they had no choice but to retreat back to France, with the Russian winter looming on the horizon. The retreat from Moscow was a disaster for the French army, with temperatures plummeting to 20 degrees Celsius and snowdrifts reaching up to 3 meters in depth. The French troops, ill-equipped and malnourished, began to freeze and starve in large numbers, with estimates suggesting that over 200,000 men perished during the retreat. The Russian army, on the other hand, had emerged from the battle with a newfound sense of confidence and purpose. They had fought the French to a standstill at Borodino, and their scorched earth policy had denied the enemy the resources they needed to survive. As the French retreated, the Russians pursued them relentlessly, harrying their flanks and rear guard, and inflicting further casualties on an already battered army. The defeat of Napoleon's army in Russia marked a significant turning point in European history, as it signaled the beginning of the end of his imperial ambitions. The Sixth Coalition, comprising Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Britain, would eventually defeat Napoleon at the Battle of Leipzig in 1813, and he would be exiled to the island of Elba in 1814. The legacy of the Battle of Borodino can still be seen today, with the battle remembered as a heroic defense of Russia against foreign invasion. The bravery and sacrifice of the Russian soldiers who fought at Borodino have become legendary in Russian military history, and their memory continues to inspire patriotism and national pride. The bravery, strategy, and chance that intersected at Borodino have left an indelible mark on history, and their impact continues to be felt to this day. Join me next as we explore other pivotal moments in history where courage, cunning, and circumstance have shaped the course of human events. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first